I can't shake this heavy, sick feeling in my gut that something's watching us, something's waiting for its next move, and it's driving me crazy. Last night, I heard my name whispered, not in a dream, no, I swear it was real, it felt real, the kind of real that gets under your skin and makes your bones cold, you know. I jolted awake, thinking I'd shake it off, but the room, it wasn't right, it felt wrong, colder than it should have been, and I swear I saw something, a shadow in the corner of my room, just sitting there, still, like it was waiting for me to notice it, and the second I blinked, it was gone, but the feeling stayed, it lingered like a bad taste in my mouth, and I couldn't shake it, not even in the daylight. Jen's been acting weird in class, jittery, like she's constantly on edge, looking over her shoulder like someone's following her, and I'm starting to wonder if she's feeling what I'm feeling because when I ask her if she's okay, her eyes widen, and she whispers, "Do you think Sarah's really gone? Like, gone? And it hits me that maybe Jen knows more than she's letting on. Maybe we all do, but no one's brave enough to say it because what if it's true? What if Sarah didn't just disappear, what if she was taken? And if she was, who's next? Alex hasn't shown up to school in days, not since that night, and I've tried calling him, but it's always voicemail, always nothing, and part of me wants to go to his house, bang on his door, demand answers, but there's this sinking dread in my chest, this fear that if I find him, he won't be Alex anymore, or worse, he'll be gone, too, and I can't handle that, not now, not after Sarah. Then, out of nowhere, Jen shows up at my house last night, pale as a ghost, her eyes wild like she's seen something she can't unsee, and she keeps talking about shadows, how they've been following her, and I want to brush it off, tell her it's just stress, but the way she looks at me, the way her voice shakes when she says she heard Sarah's voice calling her name, I can't brush it off, because deep down, I believe her, and that terrifies me more than anything. I can't sleep anymore, not really, not after hearing Jen talk about those shadows, and now every creak, every groan of the house feels like it's something more, like the walls themselves are watching me, and I've started leaving the lamp on because the darkness doesn't feel safe anymore, it feels like it's alive, creeping closer, and every time I blink, the shadows stretch longer, like they're reaching for me, waiting for the right moment to pull me in. Then, this morning, Alex's mom called, asking if I've seen him, if I know where he is because he didn't come home last night, and that's when it hits me, like ice water in my veins. This is happening again, the same way it happened with Sarah, the same way we ignored all the signs until it was too late, and now Alex is next, I just know it, and it feels like time is running out. Jen called me in the middle of the night, her voice shaking, words tumbling out so fast I could barely keep up, but the one thing she kept saying over and over was that she's hearing it again. Sarah's voice, calling her name, louder now, more insistent, like it's coming for her, and I just grab my jacket and run. Heart pounding in my chest because I know this isn't just in her head, it's real, it's happening, and I need to be there, I need to do something. When I get to Jen's place, she looks worse than before, pale and trembling, eyes darting around the room like she's expecting something to leap out of the shadows, and that's when she tells me the worst part. The Ouija board, it's still at Sarah's house, and she swears it's calling her, pulling her in, like it's not done with us, like it won't stop until it's taken all of us, and I can't breathe because if she's right, if that board is still in control, we're screwed, all of us. We make a pact, right there, in the middle of her living room, that tomorrow we'll go back to Sarah's house, we'll find the board, and we'll destroy it because if that's the thing that started all of this, then maybe, just maybe, it's the only thing that can stop it, but even as we make this promise, there's this feeling gnawing at the back of my mind, this horrible sense that no matter what we do, it's already too late. We head to Sarah's place the next day, and the second we step inside, it's like time just stopped in there, everything frozen in this eerie silence, like the house itself is holding its breath, and Sarah's parents aren't home, which makes it easier, but also worse because without them, the place feels like a tomb, untouched, like she's still here somehow, and we can feel it, the heaviness in the air, like something's waiting for us to screw up again, and when we reach her room, it smells stale, like it's been sealed off for months even though it's only been days, and there, right in the middle of the room, is that damn Ouija board, still sitting there, planchette resting on the letter S, like it's been waiting for us this whole time, my stomach turning because I know, this thing isn't done with us yet. Jen doesn't want to touch the board, and honestly, neither do I, but we have to, don't we? We have to know if it's still active, if it's still got some hold over us, over Sarah, over everything, so I force myself to sit down, my fingers trembling as they rest on the planchette. Jen hesitating before doing the same, and the room feels like it's holding its breath. The silence so thick it's almost crushing, and we ask the board. Our voices barely whispers, who's next, because we have to know, we have to be ready, and for a second, nothing happens, nothing at all, just the oppressive quiet, and then suddenly, the planchette jerks under our fingers, slow at first, but then faster, spelling out, J. And Jen pulls her hand away like she's been burned, but I can't, I'm stuck, I'm locked in, and the damn thing keeps moving, keeps spelling without her. It spells out her full name, Jennifer, and we stare at each other, horrified, and I can feel it, the air around us changing, getting thicker, heavier, like something's pushing down on us, like we're not alone anymore, and then we hear it, footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming from the hallway, but when we look, there's no one there, just that crushing sense of being watched, of being stalked, and Jen's eyes are wide, her breathing so shallow I think she might pass out, and before I can even think, we're bolting from the room, slamming the door behind us like that'll stop whatever's out there from getting in, but deep down, we both know it won't. Outside, it feels worse, somehow, the air is thicker, harder to breathe, like we brought something out with us, something that wasn't supposed to leave that room, and Jen's shaking uncontrollably, her face pale and clammy, and I feel like I'm going to throw up, but I can't stop moving, can't stop thinking that we need to destroy this thing, that the only way to stop it is to destroy the board tonight, and Jen agrees, she's convinced it's the only way to break the cycle, to stop whatever we unleashed, and honestly, I'm too scared to argue because what else can we do? That night, Jen comes over to my place, and we're both on edge, jumping at every little noise, and I keep hearing things outside, scratches, whispers, something tapping against the windows, but every time I look, there's nothing there, just the dark, just the creeping sense that we're being hunted, and I feel like I'm losing my mind, like it's already too late for us. We gather supplies, matches, gasoline, whatever we can think of, because if this thing has taken Sarah and Alex, if it's coming for Jen, then we can't take any chances, we have to end it, we have to burn it down, and as we're getting ready to leave, Jen stops dead, her face going pale, and she whispers, "Do you hear that?" And at first, I don't, but then I do, this soft voice, faint, distant, like it's coming from miles away, but clear enough that it sends a shiver down my spine because it's calling Jen's name, over and over, and we sprint to my car, not daring to look back, fumbling with the keys, hands shaking so bad I can barely get them into the ignition, and the voice fades as we drive, but the fear doesn't, it sits heavy in the pit of my stomach. Back at Sarah's house, we sneak inside, trying to stay quiet even though there's no one around, and we douse the room in gasoline, the smell filling the air, and the board. It looks innocent, just a piece of wood sitting there, but we both know better, we know it's more than that now, it's alive, it's a doorway, and we can't let it stay open. Jen strikes the match, and the flames catch instantly, roaring to life, but there's something else, something foul in the air, like the smell of rot, of decay, and as the board burns, the temperature in the room drops, plummets, and it's freezing now, so cold I can see my breath, and the flames flicker, struggling to stay alive, and then it happens. This figure, this shadow, rising from the smoke, at first, I think it's just a trick of the fire, but then it moves, it looms, tall and menacing, and it doesn't have a face, but I swear I can feel its eyes on us, watching, waiting. Jen screams, but I can't move, I'm frozen, trapped, and the shadow stretches toward us, the air crackling with something unnatural, and my whole body feels locked in place, like something's holding me there, and then, just as suddenly, the flames die out, plunging the room into darkness, the board gone, reduced to ashes, but the shadow, it's still there, lingering, hanging in the air like a threat, like a promise. We stumble out of the house, gasping for air, trying to convince ourselves it's over, but I know it's not, I know deep down that the board wasn't the source, that this was just the beginning, that whatever we let out, it's still out there, and it's not done with us yet. The next morning, Jen doesn't show up to school, and I call her a dozen times, but no answer. Nothing, and I go to her house, but her parents say she's not there, that she's just gone, like Sarah, like Alex, and now I'm the only one left, the only one who knows what happened, the only one who can feel it creeping closer, waiting for its turn to come for me. The whispers start again, louder this time, my name, over and over, like a chant, like it's seeping into my bones, and I barricade myself in my room, but it doesn't help, the shadows are moving now, stretching across the walls, reaching for me, and I can't escape it. No matter what I do, no matter where I go. My phone buzzes, and it's a message from an unknown number, just one word: soon. And I drop the phone, my hands shaking because I know what it means. My time is running out, there's no escaping it now. I think about running, but where would I go? It would find me, it always does. There's no point in running, so I decide to face it, to go back to where it all started, to Sarah's house, one last time. The house is dark, silent, the air thick with the smell of smoke and something else, something rotten, and my heart pounds in my chest as I walk through the front door. The shadow is waiting for me. It doesn't move, it doesn't speak, but I can feel its presence, overwhelming, suffocating, and I know it's here for me. As I step closer, the room tilts, the world warping around me, my vision blurring, and the last thing I see is the shadow reaching out, pulling me into the darkness. Let's go for the second story. We didn't talk about it the next day, not a single word, because how do you talk about something like that without sounding insane? I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart still pounding in my chest like I'd been running all night, but I hadn't. I'd been stuck in this weird loop, reliving that moment, the mirror, the grin, that awful wrongness, and I just kept telling myself it had to be in my head, right? Dreams mess with you, especially after a night like that, but when I dragged myself out of bed and looked in the bathroom mirror, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from just beyond the glass, waiting for me to slip. Tyler texted me first thing with a simple, "You good?" but I knew what he was really asking. He was as freaked out as I was, but Jake? Dead silence. Normally, he's all over our group chat, sending dumb memes or cracking jokes, but not today. Not a word from him, and that made everything feel worse, like this heavy weight was pressing down on us and none of us could breathe. I couldn't stand it, so I went to Jake's place after school without even thinking about it, just showed up at his door like it was the most normal thing in the world, but man, he looked like hell. His face was pale, bags under his eyes like he hadn't slept, and his movements were weird, like he was forcing himself to be normal. He told me he was fine, but when he said it, I saw something, his reflection in the hallway mirror. It wasn't moving with him, not exactly. I brushed it off, because come on, maybe I was still half asleep, but deep down, I knew something was off. We ended up in his basement, the same spot where everything started. The air was thick, tense, like we were waiting for something to happen even though none of us wanted it to. Jake kept glancing at the mirror, like he was daring it to do something, his eyes twitching toward it every few seconds. I thought I heard a faint tap from the glass, but Jake shrugged when I mentioned it, like he hadn't heard a thing. Maybe he was trying to convince himself it was nothing. Tyler showed up after a while, and the three of us just sat there in this uncomfortable silence. It was like none of us wanted to acknowledge what we'd seen, but the weight of it hung between us, growing heavier by the second. I couldn't take it anymore, so I finally said it. What the hell was that last night? Jake shot me a look that made my stomach twist, like I'd said something unforgivable, like saying it out loud made it real in a way none of us wanted. Before Jake could respond, Tyler's phone buzzed. He froze. I watched him look at the screen, his face draining of color. "It's a message, from me," he said, flipping his phone around so we could see. His number had sent him some weird string of numbers and symbols, nothing that made sense. He deleted it so fast, but not before I caught a glimpse, and that cold feeling settled back into my gut, worse than before. We tried to play it cool after that, like nothing had happened, started up a video game to distract ourselves, but it didn't help. The reflection in the TV screen? It was wrong. The room looked fine, but there was something in the corner, a shape, a shadow that didn't belong. I blinked and it was gone, but the unease it left behind stayed with me. Tyler snapped first. "We need to get rid of the board," he said, his voice sharp, like this was all my fault. Like I had brought this thing into our lives. I wanted to argue, tell him it wasn't me, but the truth was, I didn't care anymore. Jake was the one who brought it, but he didn't say a word, just stared at us like he was already somewhere else. That night, we headed back to Jake's house. He dragged out the Ouija board, hands trembling as he laid it on the floor. He wanted to burn it, and honestly, I was all for it, but when he tried to smash it with a hammer, the thing didn't even crack. It was like it was resisting, like it wanted to stay. That's when Jake lost it, started screaming at us, at the board, at the mirror. He was pacing, fists clenched, eyes wild. Tyler and I tried to calm him down, but he wasn't hearing us. He kept saying that his reflection had blinked at him that morning, and he wasn't even looking in a mirror. Then the lights flickered, a gust of cold air swept through the basement, and everything went still. The planchette on the board started moving on its own. Jake didn't touch it, neither did we. It spelled one word: leave. We didn't need any more convincing. We ran upstairs, the three of us, but outside, the air was thick, like it was holding onto us, pulling us down. I glanced at Jake's window and saw it again, his reflection, grinning at us from behind the glass. Jake wasn't smiling. I don't know how long we stood there, staring at it, but when Tyler finally pulled out his phone, his hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He started looking up ways to get rid of a Ouija board properly, muttering something about folklore, about how if we didn't do it right, we'd make it worse. Worse? How much worse could it get? Jake wouldn't leave his house after that. Said he was fine, said we were overreacting. But his reflection? It was slower, like it was dragging behind him, like it was waiting for the right moment to do something. None of us wanted to admit it, but we all saw it. We all knew. That night, back at my place, I tried to sleep, but all I could think about was that grin in Jake's window. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, even when I wasn't looking at the mirrors. I didn't want to look. Something was wrong. Something was waiting. But what the hell were we supposed to do about it? Next day, Tyler's blowing up my phone with these insane articles, stories about people who lose their reflections, who disappear into mirrors, about doppelgangers that steal your life and replace you, and I'm rolling my eyes at first, but I can't stop thinking about Jake, about the way his reflection lagged behind him like it was a second too slow, and then I start wondering if Tyler's right to freak out because nothing about this feels right anymore. Tyler's paranoid, and maybe I am too, because I'm catching myself avoiding mirrors, glancing at windows to make sure my reflection's moving the way it should, and it's starting to feel like the air itself is pressing down on me, like something's creeping closer that I can't see. Tyler texts me again, says we need to meet up, says we should stay away from basements and mirrors, so we meet in the park, open space, no reflections, but everything feels wrong anyway. The sun's too dim, the wind's too cold, and Jake barely talks, just sits there with his head down, eyes hollow, like he's not even there, and the more I look at him, the more I notice how drained he looks, like something's been feeding on him. Tyler's talking, trying to distract us, but every time we bring up something normal, the conversation loops back to last night, to the Ouija board, to the reflections that don't match, and no matter how hard we try, we can't escape it, can't pretend it didn't happen, and it's making us all unravel. Especially Tyler, who keeps checking his phone like he's waiting for something, anything, to happen. Then Jake, out of nowhere, laughs, but it's not his laugh. It's cold, bitter, like there's no humor in it at all. "You guys haven't noticed, have you?" he says, and his voice is different, darker. "It's not just me, it's you too." And I don't know what the hell he's talking about, but the way he says it makes my skin crawl, so I look down at the pond near where we're sitting, and my heart nearly stops because my reflection is there but it's wrong, twisted, grinning this horrible grin that I'm not making, and I stumble back, almost falling over myself as my chest tightens, the world spinning. Tyler sees it too and freaks out, throws his phone into the water like it's cursed or something, and I get it, I do, because we can't trust anything now, not our phones, not the mirrors, not even our own faces. And Jake just stands there, watching us like he's already given up, like none of this matters anymore. "It's already too late," he says, his voice distant, hollow, like he's speaking from somewhere far away, like he's not even Jake anymore, and I don't know what to do with that, so we split up, heading home in this heavy silence, and all the way back, I can't shake the feeling that I'm being followed, but it's not someone, it's my own reflection, watching me from windows, from puddles, from anything shiny enough to catch my image. That night, I can't take it anymore. I cover every mirror in my house with sheets, towels, anything I can find because I can't trust them, can't risk seeing that twisted version of myself again, but even with the mirrors covered, I can't relax. There's this tapping, soft at first, but growing louder, rhythmic, coming from behind the mirror in my room, and my heart's pounding so hard I can barely breathe. I pull the covers over my head, trying to block it out, but then I hear it, a faint whisper, my name, coming from behind the glass, and I don't dare move, don't dare look because I know that if I do, it'll be there, waiting for me. Morning comes, but there's no relief. The sheets I used to cover the mirrors? They're on the floor, crumpled like someone, or something, pulled them down, but I know I didn't touch them. My hands are shaking as I text Tyler, telling him we need answers, that we can't ignore this anymore. So we meet up again, desperate to figure out what's happening, and we start digging, searching for anything that might explain the board, the mirror, this nightmare we're trapped in. Turns out, in some old folklore, mirrors are gateways. But gateways to what? To where? We're running out of time, running out of options. We confront Jake, demand he tell us what's going on because he knows more than he's letting on, and he just laughs again, but it's even worse this time because there's no humor in it, nothing human in it. It's not just the board, he says, his voice colder than before. It's us. We're marked. And Tyler snaps, grabs Jake by the collar, shouting at him to snap out of it, but Jake's not there anymore. His eyes, his voice, it's like they belong to something else, something that's using him as a puppet. We try to leave Jake's house, but the door won't budge. The windows are sealed, and every mirror in the house? They're showing us, but not us. Distorted, grinning versions of ourselves, like they're mocking us, but we're not moving. We're frozen in place, paralyzed by our own terror, until we break a mirror, hoping it'll give us a way out, but the reflections don't disappear. They crawl out, slowly, one by one, still smiling that awful smile, like they're enjoying this. Jake collapses, hits the floor like a puppet with its strings cut, and we don't know what to do. His reflection is still standing in the mirror, watching us, smirking like it's already won, and we have no choice but to run again, bolting through the house as footsteps echo behind us, heavy and deliberate, but they're not ours. Tyler's crying, sobbing that he can't handle this anymore, and I'm barely holding it together, my mind spinning out of control as we reach the attic, the only place without mirrors, and barricade the door. It's silent for a moment, but then we hear scratching. Soft at first, then louder, like something's clawing its way through, and Tyler finds this old box filled with photographs. People with no reflections, people with their reflections standing behind them, grinning just like ours. The scratching turns to banging, harder and harder, the door shaking, and Tyler's panicking, flipping through old notes we found, mumbling about something called closing the door, but the instructions are incomplete, and the banging stops. We hold our breath, frozen in the silence, but then the mirror in the attic window cracks, the sound piercing the air like a gunshot, and Tyler screams as Jake's reflection steps through the broken glass. It's not Jake anymore, his eyes are hollow, his grin wide, and we're trapped. Tyler tries to fight it, but he's thrown across the room like a rag doll, and I'm just standing there, frozen in horror as the reflection moves closer, its grin stretching wider and wider, too wide for a human face. And I grab the nearest object, a shard of shattered mirror, and throw it at the reflection, but it shatters against the floor and nothing changes, it just keeps coming closer and closer, until it whispers, that same voice as before, crawling under my skin. You lied.